The scent of lemon butter cupcakes filled my mother's kitchen, but all I could taste was bitterness. Claire's always been more focused, Mom said casually, adjusting the tiered display of frosted desserts without glancing at me. You've just had other interests. I stood there in silence, holding my freshly framed medical degree from Northwestern. The glass shook slightly in my grip. Same school, same GPA, same sacrifices. But only one of us had their student loans paid off in full by our parents, and it wasn't me. Mom, I said evenly. Claire and I both graduated summa cum laude. We studied the same hours, took the same exams. I just don't understand why you and Dad chose to pay off only her debt. Mom finally looked up, the air thick with the scent of her disapproval. Your sister doesn't have someone like Dr. Lansing backing her. You've always had connections, Audrey. Claire needed help. Dr. Helen Lansing wasn't a connection. She was my research mentor, someone I'd earned through 4 grueling semesters of unpaid lab work and 80-hour weeks, not weekends in Tahoe like Claire. But in my parents' eyes, hard work wasn't an advantage, unless it fit their story. Just then, Dad walked in, setting his coffee mug on the counter like a gavel. It's not punishment, Audrey. You've always been more independent. Claire needs us more. Independent, I echoed quietly. That word had followed me for years. Their shield against any obligation. It's what they said when they skipped my science presentations but flew across the country for Claire's diving meets, when they gave her a Jeep for her 21st and handed me a Visa gift card. Tomorrow, they were throwing a celebration, Claire's debt-free graduation party. Invitations had gone out to extended family, friends, even professors. The printed cards read, honoring Dr. Claire Donovan and her incredible achievement. No mention of me, no dual celebration, just one spotlight as usual. I've got an early shift at County Hospital, I muttered, grabbing my keys. Will you still come to Claire's party? Mom asked, her voice softening. Not out of concern for me, but for how my absence might reflect on Claire. I'll be there, I lied. As I stepped outside into the dry heat of Phoenix, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Lansing. Need to speak urgently. Big news. Call me as soon as you can. Something told me that whatever was coming next wouldn't just shift the dynamic. It would expose it. How many times have we mistaken someone's strength for a reason to ignore their struggle? And how often do we justify inequality, even within families, by calling it practical? I parked 3 blocks from the party. Not because Valet was full, but because I needed those quiet steps under the Arizona twilight to prepare myself for what I knew this night would be. Another performance where I played the invisible twin. The rooftop restaurant Claire had chosen shimmered with string lights and gold linens. A towering banner fluttered over the glass railing. Congratulations, Doctor! Claire Donovan. No mention of me. Of course not. Inside, servers in white jackets passed around champagne and truffle sliders. My parents mingled effortlessly, laughing with hospital board members and professors, my dad's arm around Claire's shoulders like a prize ribbon. The whole thing felt less like a celebration of her graduation and more like a coronation. Addie! Claire waved from across the terrace, breaking through a group of relatives. I forced a smile. Hey, Dr. D. She looked beautiful, as always. Sleek dress, flawless makeup, easy confidence. Her presence seemed designed for occasions like this. Thank God you came, she whispered, looping her arm through mine. Mom's been asking everyone if I'm dating a cardiologist yet. I need backup. I laughed despite myself. Seriously, she leaned in. This party is way over the top. I told them it should be about both of us. I glanced at her, surprised. It was the first time Claire had ever acknowledged our shared achievement as something mutual. But before I could respond, our mom swooped in with 2 glasses of champagne. Claire, honey, the board chair from St. Luke's is here. Come say hello. Addie. Can you help the catering team? Beth says the gluten-free table isn't labeled clearly. Without waiting for a reply, she ushered Claire away. I stood there holding 2 glasses, feeling like staff. 40 minutes later, I was restocking the dessert bar when I spotted her, Dr. Helen Lansing, crossing the room like she owned it. "Addison," she greeted me warmly. "Are you ready?" I hesitated. "I don't know. This doesn't feel like the place." Dr. Lansing glanced around, her sharp eyes taking in the decor, the banner, the cake. Claire's face everywhere, mine nowhere. "Actually, it feels like exactly the place." Across the terrace, I saw my parents guiding Claire toward Dr. Marcy Bell, Chief of Neurology at Desert Mercy Medical. I knew Claire had applied there. So had I. Were they trying to boost her placement chances? For a moment, nausea rose in my throat. Dr. Lansing straightened her jacket. "Come with me." She led me toward the main gathering, where my dad was now making a toast. "We always knew Claire had something special," he declared proudly. "Even as a little girl, she had that spark, that hunger." "And tonight," Mom added, "we're just so proud to say she's stepping into her future, debt-free, thanks to hard work and a little help from us." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Claire smiled uncomfortably. Her eyes met mine across the room. Then she stepped forward. "Before we go any further," Claire said, her voice suddenly clear and firm, "I want to say something." The room quieted. My parents froze. "This celebration doesn't feel right," she continued, "because my sister Addison worked just as hard as I did. Actually, harder. She did it without tutors, without funding, without being the family favorite, and she deserves to be seen." The silence was deafening. And then, Dr. Lansing stepped forward. "For those of you who don't know," she began calmly, "Addison has just been awarded the Roswell Fellowship at Johns Hopkins. It's the most competitive neuroscience research position in the country." Gasps, then murmurs. "She earned it with groundbreaking work in neurovascular repair, research she designed and led. And she did it while balancing full-time rotations." Suddenly, people turned. People looked. At me. Applause erupted. Faculty members came forward. Even Dr. Bell raised her glass. But all I could see were my parents, stunned, blinking, caught in the light they'd spent years trying to dim. And this time, they couldn't look away. I didn't remember moving. One moment, I was frozen beside the dessert table, applause echoing around me like a dream. The next, I was surrounded. Faculty shaking my hand, old professors smiling like they suddenly remembered who I was. Even Dr. Marcy Bell, who hadn't returned my last 2 emails, was asking thoughtful questions about my research. But I barely heard any of it. All I could focus on were my parents. They stood at the far end of the terrace, still clutching their champagne glasses like shields. My dad wore a practiced smile, one I recognized from every boardroom photo in his office. My mother wasn't even trying. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, darting between me and the guests, like someone watching their favorite play go off script in real time. Claire made her way toward me again, weaving through the small crowd now forming around Dr. Lansing and me. "God, I had no idea," she said breathlessly. "You're going to Johns Hopkins?" I nodded, still trying to process everything. "That's incredible, Addie," she said, genuine pride in her voice. "I'm so happy for you." I believed her. For the first time in years, I truly believed she meant it. "I found out this morning," I said. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight. I didn't want to step on your celebration." Claire rolled her eyes. "This ridiculous party was never about me. It was about them. I begged them to make it about both of us." That stopped me. "You did?" I asked, more surprised than I should have been. She nodded, her expression tightening. "They said it would confuse the guests, said one banner was more practical." I almost laughed. Practical. That word again. Before I could respond, Dr. Bell gently touched my arm. "Addison, would you be open to discussing a post-fellowship opportunity with Desert Mercy? We'd love to bring someone like you into the department." Claire raised her eyebrows at me, impressed. I gave Dr. Bell a grateful smile. Absolutely, I'd love to talk. She walked away, and Claire leaned in. I applied to their psychiatry residency, but if they end up choosing you for neuro, I wouldn't mind. I blinked. Wouldn't that bother you? Claire shrugged. Not if you got it because you deserve it. That's how it should work. The knot in my chest, tight for years, started to loosen. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw them approaching. Slowly, hesitantly, my parents. Their journey across the terrace was agonizingly slow, mostly because they kept getting stopped by guests congratulating me. They smiled, nodded, even offered awkward praise, about me, to people who had only ever heard them brag about Claire. Finally, they reached us. Well, my dad began, clearing his throat. Dr. Lansing certainly had impressive things to say. She always does, I replied calmly. My mom forced a smile. We're just so surprised. You never mentioned anything about applying to that fellowship. Would it have mattered? I asked. They exchanged a look, one I'd seen my entire life, part defensiveness, part confusion. You've always been the self-starter, Dad said. We figured you didn't need our help. Claire stepped in, her voice clear. That's not a compliment. My mom looked wounded. We supported both of you, just differently. I stayed silent. Claire shook her head. That's not what happened. You prioritized me. You made everything about me. And you ignored Addison every step of the way. My father stiffened. Claire, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, she cut in. I should have said this years ago. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I didn't feel angry anymore. Not really. Just tired. I'm leaving for Baltimore in 3 weeks, I said. I'd like to go without unfinished business. My dad nodded slowly. We'll talk. Soon. Claire gave my arm a squeeze. You okay? For the first time in a long time, I said, yeah. Later that night, I stood alone at the far end of the terrace, staring out at the Phoenix skyline. String lights blinked behind me. Laughter floated in from the dining area. Claire joined me quietly, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. To new chapters, she said, handing me one. To rewriting old ones, I replied. She smiled. That too. We clinked glasses. For once, the toast wasn't about rivalry, or comparison, or performance. It was just 2 sisters, no longer caught in a story someone else wrote for them, beginning something new. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at my apartment door. I didn't have to check the peephole. No one else knocks like that. 2 firm raps, a long pause, then a third like punctuation. My father had always entered rooms like a man expecting to be obeyed. When I opened the door, both of them stood there, my mother gripping a small gift bag, my father holding a white box with a bow that looked more expensive than anything inside probably was. Addison, my mom said softly, can we come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat on the edge of my couch like visitors to a stranger's home. I remained standing. We brought something for you, Dad said, placing the box on my coffee table. You know, now that both of you are starting your careers, we thought it was time for something special. I opened the lid. Inside sat a rose gold watch, the same model Claire had gotten 6 months earlier for her birthday. I'd complimented it then, and Mom had smiled vaguely and said, she earned it. Now here was mine. Late, symbolic, and hollow. It's lovely, I said, not touching it, though a bit delayed. They didn't answer right away. We didn't realize, Mom said, her voice tight. We didn't see. No, I interrupted gently. You saw. You just looked away. My dad ran a hand through his hair. Addie, we know you must have felt overlooked sometimes. Sometimes? I asked. You missed my research presentations. You ignored my grant awards. You told me to find free online resources while paying for Claire's MCAT prep. We only had so much money, he said quickly. We had to make choices. And consistently, I said. voice rising despite myself. You chose her. Mom flinched. We love you both equally, she said. Maybe, I replied. But you didn't treat us equally, and that matters. The room fell into a heavy silence. Then, for the first time in years, my mother's composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears. We thought you were stronger, she whispered. We thought you didn't need us as much. That old excuse. I was strong because I had to be, I said. You never gave me the choice. They stayed a little longer, long enough to offer a weak, wandering apology that left more unsaid than said. Then they left, with the gift box still on the table and my forgiveness hanging unfinished in the air. The next week was surreal. Emails poured in, from professors who had barely acknowledged me before, from former classmates now suddenly eager to catch up. I even got a message from a residency director who had previously chosen Claire over me for a rotation slot, now asking if I'd be open to collaborative opportunities. Funny what people remember after a standing ovation. Claire and I saw each other a few times before my move. It wasn't always easy. We had years of imbalance to sort through. But she showed up. She listened. She never once tried to center herself in my story, and that meant more than she knew. 3 weeks later, the movers came. I stood in the doorway of my little apartment in downtown Phoenix, taping up the last box of medical books when Claire arrived with iced coffee and a lump in her throat. Baltimore feels very far away, she said, sitting on the floor next to the boxes. It's only 2,000 miles, I teased. We've survived worse. Remember anatomy lab? She laughed. I still have nightmares about the musculoskeletal practical. We sat in silence for a minute. Then she said, I keep thinking about everything Mom and Dad did, or didn't do. I used to think I was lucky. But maybe I was just dependent. I looked at her, surprised. You didn't do anything wrong, Claire. She shook her head. I didn't do enough right. I could have spoken up sooner. I saw things. I just didn't want to rock the boat. I understood that too well. They're hurting, she added. Mom cries every time someone mentions you. Dad's telling the whole neighborhood about his daughter at Hopkins, like he personally mentored you. Let them, I said. It doesn't define me anymore. And I meant it. The ache for approval, the constant hunger for their praise, had faded. Dr. Lansing had given me what my parents never could: belief without condition, support without resentment, a sense of worth that wasn't tied to performance. What happens now? Claire asked softly. With us? I looked at her and smiled. Now we figure out who we are without all that noise between us. She nodded. I'd like that. When I finally stepped into the cab to head to the airport, I glanced back at her standing by the curb. Her hand lifted in a wave. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something unfinished behind. I was just beginning something new. Baltimore felt different, not just because of the cold, or the old row houses lined with ivy, or the heavy mist that clung to the city like memory, but because I wasn't showing up to prove anything to anyone. For once, I arrived as me, not as someone's shadow. Johns Hopkins was every bit as intense as I imagined. My first week was a blur of back-to-back meetings, ID badges, housing paperwork, security clearances, and orientation sessions that ran until 9 p.m. Dr. Lansing had warned me, it's not for the faint of heart, Addison. But it will shape you. She was right. I wasn't just a fellow now. I was the Patterson Fellow, the youngest in the program, the first from my med school in over 2 decades. And suddenly, I was being introduced to people whose names were printed on the textbooks I'd highlighted cover to cover. At first, I felt like an imposter. But then I started speaking in meetings, and people listened. When I presented my preliminary study on neurovascular regeneration using dual-path modeling, the department chair asked for a one-on-one meeting the next morning. Not to correct me, to learn more. Every time that happened, a quiet voice inside whispered, "They see you now." Meanwhile, back in Phoenix, the narrative was shifting too. Dr. Lansing forwarded me a copy of the alumni magazine. The cover story read, Beyond the Shadow Doctor, Addison Donovan's Breakthrough in Neurovascular Science. Inside was a full spread about the fellowship, my research, and even a quote from Dr. Marcy Bell about how Addison's vision and focus set her apart early on. The irony wasn't lost on me. Some of those same people hadn't even remembered my name a year ago. My inbox exploded. Former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly remembering shared study sessions. Professors who once doubted my research were now asking for early access to my publications. A girl who once accused me of being too competitive now wanted to know how I got the fellowship for her little sister. I responded politely, but I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore. My parents tried, in their way. They called more often, awkward phone calls filled with long silences and clumsy attempts at connection. My dad sent me an article about Johns Hopkins topping a national ranking, with a note that read, Guess they knew what they were doing when they picked you. My mom mailed me a care package that included homemade lemon bars and an old baby photo of me holding a toy stethoscope. The caption on the back read, You've always been meant for this. I didn't know how to feel. Gratitude, bitterness, closure? Maybe all of it at once. I didn't reply right away. I needed to be sure that their outreach wasn't about their discomfort, but about finally seeing me for who I'd always been. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Claire. You've gone viral, she said, half laughing, half panicked. What? Your fellowship speech. Someone recorded part of Dr. Lansing's announcement at my party. It's all over LinkedIn and Reddit. People are talking about parental favoritism and academic merit. It's everywhere. I froze. My private pain, now a public conversation. They're calling you the forgotten twin who made it, she added. There's even a thread with like 80,000 likes. I sat down on the edge of my dorm bed. My heart wasn't racing. It was oddly calm. I hadn't asked for any of it, but maybe it was necessary. Are Mom and Dad freaking out? I asked quietly. Claire sighed. Dad says it's a gross exaggeration, and Mom keeps saying the internet doesn't know the whole story. But they do, I said. They know enough. She paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad they're uncomfortable. Maybe now they'll finally reflect. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. One night, 2 months into the fellowship, I was walking home from the lab, coat zipped against the Baltimore wind, when my phone buzzed again. It was Dr. Lansing. How does it feel? She texted. I stared at the message, standing beneath a flickering street lamp, unsure how to answer. Like I finally stopped waiting to be seen, I wrote back, and started walking like I was already visible. She replied with a simple, Good. Keep walking. I had. I would. The little girl who'd stood at every school assembly clapping for her sister, while no one clapped for her. She wasn't just standing anymore. She was leading, researching, healing, becoming. And this time, no one would mistake her strength for silence again. It was nearly midnight when Claire called again. I booked a ticket, she said, before I could even say hello. For what? To visit you, Baltimore. I want to see where you're working, meet your team, maybe even sit in on a seminar. If you'll let me. The last time Claire had asked to enter my world, we were 6 years old, and I was building a Lego hospital while she begged to play doctor. Back then, I'd said no, because she always took over. This time, I paused for a different reason. You really want to come? I asked. I don't want there to be this distance between us anymore, she said. Not just miles. I mean, all of it. There it was, spoken clearly, without excuse. Then come, I said, and I meant it. When she arrived that weekend, it was like a second beginning. We walked through the ivy-covered campus, grabbed coffee in the faculty lounge, and she asked genuine questions about my research, my mentors, my patients. Not out of obligation, but with curiosity and respect. We spent Saturday night in my tiny kitchen eating overpriced sushi from a paper bag. She sat cross-legged on a stool while I cleaned up the takeout boxes, her eyes soft as she watched me. "I've been thinking about them," she said, meeting our parents. I didn't need her to explain. "They're still spinning," she continued. "Mom's obsessed with fixing things, and Dad keeps rewriting the story in his head, like he always supported both of us equally, just in different ways." I let out a dry laugh. It's amazing what memory can erase when pride's on the line. Claire nodded, then looked at me, serious now. "Do you hate them?" I blinked. "No," I said slowly. "I used to want them to feel what I felt, to be dismissed, compared, minimized. But that's not hate, that's grief." She absorbed that for a while, turning her water bottle in her hands. "Do you think they'll ever change?" "I think they might try," I said. "But that's not what I'm waiting on anymore." She looked up. "So what are you waiting on?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm finally not waiting." We stayed up late talking about everything we had buried over the years. The birthday parties that centered her, the report cards they forgot to ask about, the constant reminder that she was the daughter who needed more. She wiped at her eyes after one particularly painful memory and whispered, "I didn't want to be the reason you were invisible." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You weren't the reason. You were just the excuse they used." That night, we fell asleep on opposite ends of my pull-out couch, the silence between us no longer strained, but full of understanding. The next morning, as we walked through the garden behind the research building, Claire said something I hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about switching programs, not leaving psychiatry, but maybe shifting to pediatric trauma therapy. Something closer to what you're doing, something with impact." I smiled. "Do it for you," I said, "not to match me." She grinned. "I'm finally starting to figure out the difference." By the time she flew home, something between us had healed. Not perfectly, not magically, but honestly. The years of comparison and quiet resentment didn't dissolve overnight. But for the first time, they weren't walls. They were just history. And we were finally free to build something better. Without rivalry, without roles, without pretending. Just sisters. And that, after everything, was more than enough. The final Monday of my first quarter at Johns Hopkins, I walked into the lab 15 minutes early. Not because I had something to prove. Those days were behind me. But because I wanted to be there. Fully present, fully myself. The morning sun spilled across the lab tables, catching the edge of the microscope like a quiet promise. I slipped on my lab coat, clipped my ID badge, and took a breath. Not nervous, not hurried, just ready. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing someone's approval. I wasn't trying to prove that I deserved a seat at the table. I was building the table. Emails kept coming. Fellowships, conferences, even a TEDx invitation I wasn't sure I was brave enough to accept. The thread from the video Dr. Lansing had unknowingly stepped into was still alive, still growing. People had started sharing their own family stories, quiet comparisons, uneven support, the long shadows of favoritism that shaped their lives. It was humbling to realize I wasn't alone. I got messages from strangers, young med students, exhausted siblings, even parents who admitted they saw themselves in my story. Some apologized to children they hadn't called in weeks. Others promised to do better. A few said nothing, just sent virtual hugs and tear emojis. The story had stopped being about me, and in a way, that made it matter even more. When I called Claire that evening, she picked up on the first ring. "I'm thinking about writing something," I told her. "Not for a journal, for people. About what it feels like to be overlooked and still rise." She paused. "Do it. You've earned the right to tell the story." I smiled. Number I've earned the right to live beyond it. And I did. Not as someone's forgotten daughter, not as the quiet twin, not as the girl who had to work twice as hard to be seen, but as Dr. Addison Donovan, neuroscientist, researcher, sister, and a woman who finally understood The most powerful recognition doesn't come from others. It comes from within. As we grow older, we often reflect on the roles we've played parent, sibling, mentor, and how our choices shaped the people around us. This story reminds us that love alone isn't enough. How we show it matters. Sometimes we uplift one child because we think they need it more, believing the strong one doesn't. But strength can hide silent wounds, and independence isn't proof that someone doesn't long to be seen. The lesson here is simple, but powerful. Don't wait for someone to succeed publicly before you recognize their quiet resilience. Whether you're a parent, a leader, or a friend, look again at the people who've carried more than they've shared. Ask the questions you've avoided. Offer the praise you withheld. Because even late acknowledgement can heal more than we realize. And if you've ever been that overlooked one, know this: your worth was never defined by the silence around you. Keep rising, keep walking. Because when recognition finally comes, from others or from within, it's not too late, it's right on time.